There are moments in life that don't announce their arrival. They simply happen, and when they pass, nothing is ever the same again. There are no thunderclaps, no warnings, no grand sign. Sometimes it all begins with something so small it seems irrelevant. Different silence, a slight discomfort, a gaze that lingers too long on the void. But within that ordinary instant, something awakens. It's as if an invisible line breaks between what you were and what you were about to become. Carl Jung would call this the beginning of awakening, the point at which the soul decides it can no longer live asleep. You feel it, don't understand it. The routine continues, the commitments remain. People say the same old things, and yet everything seems out of place. The coffee tastes the same, the work is the same, but there's a distance between you and the world that didn't exist before. It's as if there's a thin layer of glass separating you from. You see everything, but don't touch anything. And deep down, a question begins to ask, why does everything that once made sense now sound empty? This is the first sign that something deep is stirring. Consciousness begins to crack. Through these cracks, the soul tries to. Jung said that the unconscious doesn't knock gently, it invades. When something inside you needs to be seen, it finds a way. A crisis, a broken relation, a job that loses its meaning, unexplained fatigue. At first glance, it seems like bad luck. It seems like punishment. In truth, it's a calling. Have you ever noticed how the biggest changes in life almost never come with joy? They come disguised as pain, loss, and frustration, because human beings rarely awaken when they are comfortable. Discomfort is necessary to rouse the soul from its slumber, and it is in this discomfort that you begin to realize that what brought you here will not take you. Life, suddenly, demands a new version of you, one that you don't yet know. However, this realization is not accompanied by courage. It comes with fear. The fear of abandoning what is familiar, the fear of no longer recognizing oneself. Jung stated that nothing is more frightening than looking into one's own soul, because it shows not only what is beautiful, but also what has been denied, forgotten, hidden. Seeing the world is easy. What is difficult is seeing oneself honestly. What is difficult is admitting how much of one's life was built to please others, how much of one's choices came from the fear of being rejected, how much of one's strength was merely defense. When the unconscious begins to emerge, it doesn't ask permission. It places you before mirrors you didn't want to see. It shows you what was behind every decision, every repeated pattern, every failure that seemed like a coincidence. The soul doesn't use words, it uses events. Everything you call bad luck is just its way of trying to wake you up. What you call chaos is the way the unconscious seeks balance. Perhaps you're exactly. There are days when you wake up and feel like you no longer belong to your own body, your own routine, your own story. Something is missing, but you don't know what it is. Conversations tire you, asks seem pointless, and genuine joy becomes a distant echo. It's the moment when the soul, tired of being ignored, begins to manifest itself more strongly. It doesn't want the end, it wants the beginning of something real. But how do you begin if you don't know what you're ending? How do you move forward if the ground that supported everything seems to dissolve beneath you? These questions echo like thunder in the silence, and it is in this void, seemingly without answers, that awakening begins. Jung called this transition the dangerous point of the soul, the instant when the old self begins to die, but the new one has not yet been born. It is the interval between ruin and rebirth. Most people try to escape this state. We seek distractions, throw ourselves into new projects, change cities, appearances, companions. But escape never resolves the end, it only postpones it. The more we run, the more it grows. Because what haunts us is not outside, it's inside. What hurts is not the world, it's the resistance. Transformation only happens when we stop running, except to look. And what we find in that gaze isn't always beautiful. We find hidden resentments, old frustrations, pains we thought we'd overcome. We find what we were forced to be in order to survive. We find the character we created to fit the roles the world. Jung called this mask the persona, a necessary but limited social construct. It protects, but it also imprisons. Comfortable, but false. When you realize this, the shock is inevitable. Because suddenly you understand that you've lived for years trying to maintain an image that doesn't represent you. You've lived seeking recognition, approval, status, and yet you feel empty. The persona is loved, but you, the being behind it, remain invisible. And the more this distance grows, the more your body and mind begin. How many times have you said I'm fine when you weren't? How many times have you kept quiet to avoid conflict, swallowed truths to avoid losing affection, smiled when you only wanted to cry? Each of those times was a small betrayal of your soul. And the soul, however silent it may be, never forgets. It demands its due, not with revenge, but with symptoms. Anxiety, insomnia, apathy, constant feeling of meaninglessness. All of this is the muffled cry of a part of you asking to be heard. Awakening doesn't begin with it begins with exhaustion. And you get tired of pretending when you realize that living asleep is more painful than facing the fear of waking up. From that moment on, something inside you changes direction. Subtle, but definitive. And that's when destiny truly begins to right itself, not with external choices, but with the invisible decision to no longer lie to yourself. But be careful, this beginning is silent. No one will notice, and you yourself might doubt it. It's an internal movement, an almost imperceptible gesture of sincerity. It's the moment when you stop blaming the world and start listening to yourself. It's the first step of awakening, the point where your gaze turns inward and the universe, curious, begins to respond. Nothing extraordinary happens outside. The extraordinary is what begins to happen inside. It's a change in vibration, a reconfiguration of consciousness. Suddenly what once seemed bearable becomes unbearable. Superficial conversations sound empty. Fleeting pleasures lose their luster. Masks weigh us down. And all this is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of evolution. It's your soul trying to remind you of who you were before the fear, before the mask, before the rush. It's whispering, you didn't come into the world to survive, you came to remember. But remember what? The truth you hid from yourself. And then one day, amidst the weariness and silence, you feel something different. It's not joy, nor sadness. Presence. A calmness without apparent. A perception. Something greater is guiding everything. And you understand. The day when everything changes doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with silence. It's the soul taking command. From then on, nothing will ever be the same. Because once consciousness expands, it never returns to its previous size. What was invisible is now evident. What was routine now seems like a prison. And what was once fear now reveals itself as opportunity. You begin to realize that the world isn't collapse, reorganizing itself. And as the old fades away, the new approaches in the form of intuition. You don't understand it yet. You feel that something is being paired. A new story, a new strength, a new consciousness. The change is still invisible to the eyes, but it is real. It's the beginning of awakening. The soul knocks at the door, and this time you listen. And it is in that instant, silent, intimate, and irreversible that true transformation begins. Because the day everything changes, Gleese, is never the day something happens inside. It's the day you decide, for the first time, to listen to what has always been speaking inside you. There are days when you wake up and feel something invisible weighing your chest. The sun is in the same place, people say the same thing. The world keeps turning, but inside you, everything seems to have stopped. It's a strange feeling, as if life has lost its brightness and sound. The laughter of others sounds distant. Plans lose their meaning, and the mirror reflects someone you recognize only by appearance, no longer by essence. You try to follow the usual routine. Get up, have coffee, answer messages, smile out of obligation. But inside there is a silence that screams. It's emptiness, and it has come to remind you that some part of your soul has been forgotten away. Jung called this state the dark night of the soul, a period in which the old self begins to die, and the new one has not yet been born. It's a space between worlds, an existential limbo where nothing seems to work as it once did. And the most confusing thing is that, to others, everything seems normal. Carry out your tasks, you talk, you feign control. But control no longer exists. Inside, something has fallen apart, and you feel yourself being pulled to a place you don't. It's frightening, because the unknown offers no guarantee. Yet something deeper within you knows there's no turning back. At this point, many try to run away. They seek distractions, a new series, a trip, a relationship, anything to postpone the confrontation. But the soul is patient and relentless. If it is not heard, it will return with more. You can try to convince yourself that everything is fine. You can fill your day with commitments. You can laugh loudly to drown out the internet. At night, when the world is silent, the call returns. Always return. How many times have you felt surrounded by people completely alone? How many times have you smiled in public but cried silently in the bathroom, unable to explain why? This is how the soul manifests itself when ignored. It creates discomfort to force you to look. And the more you resist, the more life begins to put. A mistake at work, a pointless argument, an unexpected loss. Situations that seem random but carry hidden messages. The psyche speaks in symbols, not words. What seems like coincidence is often a mirror of what you need to see. Jung said that the unconscious constantly seeks to restore lost balance. When you stray too far from what is authentic, it finds a way to bring you back, sometimes subtly, sometimes with strength. That's why certain cycles repeat themselves in your life, even when you swear that this time it will be different. Same types of people, same mistakes, the same feelings. Nothing changes until something inside you changes. Pain is the soul's mechanism to pull you out of stagnation. Imagine an old house. From the outside, it looks stable, but inside there are cracks in the walls, rusty pipes, and jammed windows. You can keep painting the facade every year, but one day, inevitably, the roof collapses. That's what happens to us. We spend years renovating the appearance, while the interior cries out for help. And when the collapse comes, we call it a crisis. But in reality, it's just the truth demanding its way out. Truth doesn't arrive as a divination. Sometimes it emerges in a banal moment, a lingering look in the mirror, a conversation that awakens something, a loss that dismantles, a sudden snap, flash of lucidity amidst the vision. That's where the process of rebirth hurts, because first you have to die not physically, but symbolically. Die to illusions, to roll. There's a common scene among those who go through this. A lost gaze in the darkness of the emotionless body on the bed, the mind asking, where did I go wrong? And the answer, though painful, is simple. You lost yourself when you started living to be accepted, not to be whole. When you began seeking love and approval and forgot the love that springs from within. When you traded authenticity for security. The soul feels this betrayal, and it doesn't remain silent. This moment, darkness is not the enemy. It is the cradle of the new. Everything you feel, the fear, the discouragement, the confusion, are symptoms of the birth of consciousness. It is the inner universe reorganizing itself. Pain is not punishment, transition. Suffering is the friction between what wants to be born and what refuses to die. When you understand this, perception changes. You begin to see meaning where before there was only chaos. The journey is slow. There are no shortcuts to awakening. You may get irritated, doubt yourself, want to give up, and okay, it's part of the process. In the midst of despair, something within you learns to stay, to remain even when you don't. Running away only postpones the running from pain is run itself. And ironically, the more you run, the more it catches up with you. Some people report that during this period their dreams become intense. Strange, symbolic, sometimes disturbing dreams. It's the unconscious trying to communicate. It speaks through images, as if the inner world were projecting films onto the screen of the mind. Dreams of old houses, deep waters, dead ends. They all have a purpose. Translate into images what you cannot yet understand in words. It's the psyche building bridges between the visible and the invisible. You may think you're going crazy, but you're actually becoming more lucid. Because the chaos you see now has always been there. You just didn't see it. The difference is that before, it unconsciously controlled you. Now, and seeing is the first step to transformation. Jung said that enlightenment doesn't come from imagining figures of light, but from becoming aware of the darkness. And that's exactly what happens at this stage. Pain reveals, emptiness teaches, silence speaks. When you stop fighting against what you feel, the energy previously used in resistance begins to transform into understanding. What seemed like punishment reveals itself as guidance. What seemed like loss shows itself as liberation. A common example. Someone loses their job and feels like the ground has disappeared beneath their feet. In despair, they believe the universe has abandoned them. Months later, they realize that the breakup pushed them in a new direction, more aligned with what they truly desire. This is life trying to correct course. But while the process unfolds, everything seems to crumble. The ego sees destruction. The soul sees reconstruction. At some point, you will realize that suffering is not the enemy, it is the teacher. That what broke you also shaped you. That what seemed like the end was only the beginning of something more. Pain is the portal through which consciousness passes to reach new dimensions of understanding. And even without realizing it, something inside you is already changing. The way you see the world is beginning to transform. What once irritated you now provokes reflection. What once frightened you now awakens curiosity. It's a sign that the old you is dissolving and a new perspective is being. This change is invisible to the eye, but perceptible in the energy. People around you sense that there's something different about you, even if they can't explain it. And this causes discomfort, because the awakening of one disturbs those who are still asleep. Some distance themselves, others criticize you, others try to bring you back to the old pattern. And that's okay. They don't see it yet. The process is solitary because it's personal. No one can go through it for you. But it is precisely in this isolation that the mirror. What was once empty begins to fill with meaning. You discover that you can be silent without feeling alone. You discover that you no longer need to pretend, whole, even without being understood. And this freedom, however discreet, is the first breath of peace after a long inner winter. This is how the dark night of the soul ends, not with sudden clarity, but with the serenity of someone who has learned to walk in the dark without. And when the light finally begins to dawn on the horizon, you understand what you called the end was only the first step of new life. But the awakening is far from complete. What comes next is not rest, it's deepening, because now the soul wants more. It wants you to listen to the signs, the symbols, and the encounters that are not coincidences. It wants to show you that nothing was right, that everything, even what hurt, was preparing you to see what was always there, waiting to be. There comes a moment when chaos begins to make sense. At first, everything seems like noise, disconnected events, random losses, illogical encounters. Suddenly, something changes. A detail repeats itself, a phrase returns unexpectedly, a number appears at crucial moments. It's as if the universe begins to flash codes that only you can see. Jung called this synchronicity, the mysterious alignment between the inner and outer worlds, secret language that connects thought and event. It is at this point that life ceases to be a sequence of chance occurrences and reveals itself as a plot carefully woven by consciousness. At first, you're suspicious. Your rational mind tries to deny it. Coincidence, but the coincidence persists. You think of someone, and minutes later that person sends you a message. You dream of an image, and the next day you see it before you. Small repetitions begin to become insistent. It's reality trying to tell you that there's something beyond common logic, a hidden intelligence moving the pieces on the board. It's the silent proof that the unconscious is not an abyss, but a living system of communication. These signs don't appear by chance. They emerge when the soul perceives that you are ready to listen. And the more you observe, the more they multiply. It's like tuning into a frequency. The more attention you give, the clearer the transmission becomes. But be careful. Seeing signs is not the same as understanding them. The unconscious speaks in symbols. Symbol is not literal. It requires interpretation, sensitivity, patience. Not everything that seems like a warning is an answer. Sometimes it's just a reflection of what you're projecting. And then comes the doubt, is the world really guiding me, or am I creating the connections? This is the question that separates superstition from consciousness, because the truth is that both things happen at the same time. External reality reflects the internal state, and consciousness shapes what it calls destiny. When Jung said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, man will call it destiny, he was describing exactly that, the moment when you realize that life has always responded to what you, even when you didn't yet know what that meant. What if everything that has happened so far was part of a message? What if every mistake, loss, or delay was a way for the unconscious to guide you to the exact point where you are now? Chance, after all, is just the name we give to the unknown before we understand it. When you begin to notice these patterns, the world changes texture. Streets, the voices, the gestures, everything takes on a new meaning. Casual conversations begin to seem like carefully written scripts. A book that falls from the shelf opens to the exact page you needed to read. A stranger says a phrase that resolves an internal dilemma. It's as if the universe begins to observe you back, silently conspiring to remind you of who you are. But this perception is also dangerous, because the ego, anxious for control, tries to appropriate the language of the invisible, begins to force meanings, to interpret everything as a sign, to transform intuition in superstition. And the sacred is lost in exaggeration. Why Jung said the soul speaks in rhythm, not urgency. The true signal doesn't shout, it resonates. It doesn't push you, it calls you. The difference lies in the calm it leaves. It's real. Everything that comes from consciousness expands and restricts. And when this perception matures, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that nothing was against you, that the pains, the delays, and even the losses were just subtle ways of redirecting you. But an inevitable doubt arises. What if I had listened sooner? What if I had understood the signs when they... This is a common trap. The mind wants to transform learning into guilt. But the soul doesn't work with delays. Everything happens when it's due. Synchronicity only appears when the student is ready to understand the symbol. Before that, it disguises itself as chance, so as not to scare you. What if suddenly the universe stopped sending signals? Would you know how to live without them, or have you become dependent on confirmation? That's another subtle trap. Awakening isn't about constantly seeking messages, but about realizing that silence itself also speaks. When nothing happens, it's because learning is taking place within. The universe isn't on pause, it's watching you digest what it has already received. Life is a constant conversation between the visible and the invisible. And you are in the middle of this dialogue. When you don't understand what the world is trying to tell you, it repeats it. When you understand, it changes its tone. Each interrupted cycle is a lesson not learned. Each repetition is an invitation to see from a new angle. The unconscious doesn't punish, it insists. It pursues you with patterns, because it wants to be integrated. An almost imperceptible moment when everything aligns. You take a deep breath, look around, and feel that something has clicked into place, even without knowing what. It's the feeling of being in the right place, at the right time, effortlessly. It's destiny reorganizing itself under the command of consciousness. This moment is subtle, but definitive. From then on, life ceases to be a sequence of decisions and becomes a natural, almost poetic flow. Right choices seem to make themselves. Opportunities arise at the exact right time, the right people arrive unannounced. But this harmony is not permanent. The restless ego tries to regain control. It wants to understand, measure, plan, rationalize. And at that moment the flow breaks down. Because the unconscious does not obey the intellect, it responds to surrender. Therefore, awakening requires silence and detachment. The mind wants to dominate. The soul wants to participate. The mind calculates, the soul feels. And it is when you stop trying to understand everything, you begin to truly perceive. Why is the human need to explain mystery so great? Why are we so afraid to simply feel what we cannot define? Perhaps because the unknown reminds us that control is merely a sophisticated illusion. That is why awakening is, above all, surrender. Not to chaos, but to the order that exists behind it. And you understand this, life becomes a mirror. Everything that irritates you shows something that hasn't yet. Everything that delights you reveals what is ready to flourish. The outer world becomes the map of the inner, and this map changes all the time because consciousness is movement. What challenges you today liberates you tomorrow. What seems like loss today reveals itself as an opening tomorrow. And then, in a moment of distraction, you realize something simple and powerful. There was never any chance involved. The entire universe was talking to you all along, you just weren't listening. Every symbol, every repetition, every emotion was a way for the soul to say, pay it. The question is, now that you're listening, what will you do with what you discover? Because seeing is the beginning, acting on what you see is the true awakening. Synchronicity isn't there to impress you, it's there to transform you. When consciousness awakens, something profound happens. The gaze shifts. The same streets, the same people, the same job, everything seems as if the world had lost an invisible. This is what Jung called the inversion of perception, the moment when the soul, previously silent, takes command and reality begins to feel itself as a mirror of the state. You realize that the chaos outside is nothing more than a projection of the chaos inside. And this changes everything, because there is nowhere left to run. It's like discovering that the prison you lived in always had the keys on the inside. Many describe this point as a rebirth, but in practice, it looks more like a suddenly, what was certain crumbles. People drift away, goals lose meaning, routine ceases to offer security. It's as if the universe is removing, one by one, the crutches that kept you standing. Sometimes this rupture comes in the form of loss, sometimes in the form of epiphany. Some wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that something is very wrong and can't say what. Some experience the strange certainty that they have lived their entire lives in a role that doesn't belong. And there are those who go through all of this at once. The body becomes exhausted, the mind fragment, and the soul begins to scream to be heard. Jung believed that the psyche, when ignored, creates external events to force an internal awakening. This is why so many people change their lives only after a trauma, a job loss, an illness, a breakup. Pain breaks the automatic cycle. It tears away the masks with a force that willpower alone would not. A man can read about spirituality for decades, but it is on the night he loses everything that he truly understands the meaning of surrender. Pain is the teacher who teaches without words. Once, Jung received a woman in his office who, for years, had dreamt of a gold scarab. She described it in detail, but couldn't understand the reason for the recurrence. During a session, while talking about this, a noise interrupted the conversation. Something was banging against. Jung got up and found a golden beetle, a very rare species in the trying to get in. He picked it up and handed it to the patient, saying only, "Here is your scarab." At that moment, the woman burst into tears. The symbol had become real. The bridge between the unconscious and the physical world had manifested. It was the turning point in healing. This episode became known as one of the most emblematic cases of synchronicity, when the inner and outer worlds merge to reveal a truth that reason alone cannot grasp. But awakening isn't always mystical. Sometimes it's brutally human. Think of a person who has lived in an unhappy marriage for years, but remains in it out of fear of loneliness. One day, without explanation, she feels unbearable anguish and decides to leave. Everyone around her calls her impulsive, reckless. But months later, she discovers a meaning she never imagined. A new career, a forgotten talent, dormant purpose. It's the unconscious forging its way with the force of an avalanche. When the soul wants to grow, it destroys what no longer serves it. Have you ever noticed how life tends to repeat itself until we learn what we need to? It's almost as if there's a hidden geometry behind it. Jung said that nothing happens without purpose, even when there's no apparent logic. The psyche manifests itself in cycles, and each cycle brings an opportunity for integration. The problem is that most of the time, we resist. We want the new, but we cling to the old. We want freedom, but we fear the emptiness that comes with it. It is in this space between wanting and fearing that suffering takes hold. There's a curious anecdote recounted by one of Jung's students. He said that in some ancient Tibetan villages, people believed that suffering was a form of spiritual initiation. When someone fell ill or lost everything, the community would gather not to mourn, but to ask, "What does your soul want to teach you?" This perspective changes everything. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of events, you begin to perceive yourself as a participant in a process of revelation. Chaos ceases to be the enemy, and becomes the messenger. That's why the more consciousness expands, the more fear tries to return. Because every real transformation requires symbolic destruction. It's necessary to let go of the identity you've built with so much effort. Jung compared this process to the death of the hero in ancient myths. He needs to descend into the underworld, face the monsters, and lose everything he believes himself to be, only then to be reborn in a form. The hero doesn't actually die. His image, his illusions, his attachment to the old version of himself die. But how can one accept this symbolic death without falling into despair? This is the question that separates those who awaken from those who sink. The secret lies in conscious surrender. Not about giving up, but about ceasing to fight against what needs to fall will fall. What needs to stay will stay. To resist is to prolong suffering. To accept is to allow pain to fulfill its purifying function. There are historical records that, during World War II, Jung told his students that the global conflict reflected the same process of internal destruction happening within humanity. What is not faced individually ends up being experienced collectively, and this remains true today. When you ignore your own shadows, they manifest in the world, in crises, in social chaos, silent wars within families. Inner peace is not just a spiritual ideal, it is a collective need. Perhaps that's why the more a person awakens, the more isolated they feel, because they begin to see beyond the role they're playing. Banal conversations lose their meaning. The distractions of the world become no. It's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from a lack of people, but from a lack of truth. You see the masks, you perceive the lies, you see the theater, and yet you can no longer participate in it. As it's a painful disillusion, but also a liberating one. One of Jung's most striking accounts describes a patient who, after a nervous breakdown, began to see the world as a theatrical performance. People seemed to be acting, their gestures exaggerated, their words repetitive. At first he believed he was going mad. But Jung helped him understand that this was a stage of awakening, a moment when consciousness recognizes the artifice of the collective persona. When you realize that everyone is pretending, including yourself, something inside breaks. But this rupture is necessary, because only by seeing the false is it possible to seek the true. And when the falsehood falls, what remains? Silence. And in that silence, fear. The fear of not knowing who you are without the role. The fear of having nowhere left to lean on. Jung called fear the guardian of the gate. It's there not to stop you, but to test if you're ready. Because behind every fear lies a dormant truth waiting. What you fear, in truth, is the power you haven't yet learned to use. There's an interesting fact that Jung liked to cite. In ancient tribes, when a young person became an adult, they were subjected to a symbolic death ritual. They were taken to the forest, left alone for days, forced to face the darkness and the unknown. They only returned when they no longer feared their own fear. This rite marked the beginning of conscious life. In a way, we all go through this at some point, even without ritual. The difference is that in modern times, the desert is internal. Awakening, therefore, is not a distant miracle. It is a human journey. It is falling, breaking, and yet continuing. It is the instant when the character dies and the observer is born. When you realize that it is not the role you play, but the one who observes you with lucidity, reality changes color. You understand that you are not at the mercy of fate, but that fate has always been merely a reflection of consciousness. And at that point, something paradoxical happens. You feel fear, and at the same time, peace. You know the path is uncertain, but you also know there is. It is the moment when fear becomes the master, chaos the ally, silence the guide. The soul begins to speak in a language that dispenses with words. For the first time, you understand. Because true awakening doesn't shout, it doesn't promise salvation, it offers clarity. And this clarity, once achieved, can never be forgotten. It is the beginning of conscious life and the end of the illusion that you still need to be saved. The mind never surrenders without a fight. When consciousness begins to expand, it reacts forcefully, trying to pull you back to the old world. It's as if a part of you, accustomed to control, desperately tries to hold on to what is crumbling. Fear, doubt, and exhaustion arise. You feel the urge to go back to being who you pretend you didn't see, to return to the old norm. But the problem is that the old no longer serves you. It's like trying to wear a skin that has shrunk. No matter how hard you try, it no longer fits. At this point, awakening becomes a silent battle. On one side, the mind, its habits, excuses, and on the other, the soul, insisting that you move forward even without guarantees. The mind whispers, "It's too late." The soul replies, "Hasn't even done yet." The mind says, "You won't be able to." Soul patiently insists, "Trust. It's an invisible war. Every thought is a sword." The temptation to give up is enormous because the unknown seems too dark. But what you call darkness, merely the space where the new has not yet been. Many cannot endure this phase and try to go back. They resume old vices, reopen doors they had already closed, seek comfort in the same illusions that hurt. Nothing fits in. The old life has lost its cog in the machine, like a gear that no longer moves. Jung said that whoever returns to the unconscious after seeing it does so as a traitor, because once you see it, there is no going back. You can try to silence your conscience, but it doesn't disappear, it just whisks. It is in this resistance that the deepest pain arises. Not physical pain, but the pain of what is being forcibly taken. The ego suffers because it is being stripped bare, and no part of us likes to control. The mind creates distractions, overwork, consumption, comparisons, promises that everything will be simple again. But the unconscious does not negotiate. It wants total integration. It is not content with half-truths. Some describe this stage as crossing a desert. Nothing flourishes. You feel you've lost the meaning of things. What once motivated you now seems distant. Faith that sustained you begins to waver. It's the point where the silence becomes deafening. But it is precisely there, in that almost unbearable emptiness, that real transformation. The soul needs the space that absence creates. It is when everything seems dead that something invisible begins to germinate. It's curious how life prepares the ground for the new by destroying everything that is old. You may think you are being punished, but you're being remade. It's nature's process applied to consciousness, the autumn that precedes spring. And the more you try to hold on to the leaves, the more painful the fall. Letting go is not failing. It's allowing the cycle to fulfill its purpose. Wisdom lies in not interfering. A common account among those going through this stage is sudden loss of interest in things that were once pleasurable. Music, places, people, everything seems distant. It's as if the world were in black and white. But in reality, the colors haven't disappeared, they've just changed frequency. What once satisfied you now captivates you, and what seemed empty now calls to you. It's the readjustment of your inner vibration. The soul is tuning its senses to a new type of perception, but the ego resists. It begins to disguise itself as spirituality, trying to transform awakening into conquest, self-knowledge into vain. It's the most dangerous trap, believing that you are evolving simply because you're aware of the process. True awakening is not superiority, it's humility. It's looking inward and realizing that behind the masks, we are all learning the same lesson, that of feeling again. During this journey, loneliness often seems unbearable. Friends drift away, relationships change, sense of belonging disappears. You feel displaced, as if you've been taken out of the world and placed in a space between realities. But this isolation is not punishment, refinement. Soul separates you so that you stop searching outside for what you only find within. It is in silence that the new self begins to form, and in emptiness that it learns to breathe. There are accounts of people who, after long periods of solitude, began to notice small, almost imperceptible changes, a feeling of peace without reason, sudden clarity amidst chaos, a lightness that didn't stem from any external event. These are the first signs of integration. It's when the soul begins to occupy the space left by the ego. There's no explosion, no ecstasy, just a profound tranquility, like sea after a storm. But before that state arrives, the mind makes its last attempt. It creates catastrophic scenarios. What if nothing works out? What if you're fooling yourself? What if it's too late to change? It's the despair of the old self fighting to survive. And this fight can be violent. Some people experience insomnia, anxiety attacks, desire to disappear. Not because they are ill, but because they are in transition. The body reacts to what the soul is transforming. It's the adjustment between the visible and the invisible. It is at this point that awakening tests your courage. You need to cross the desert without a map, trust in what you don't see, and keep walking even without certainty. No answers will come from outside. No sign will confirm the path. Faith at this stage is not belief, it is resistance. It is the act of remaining in the midst of the void, believing that it has a purpose, as it does. And when you least expect it, something changes. There's no warning. One day you wake up and the air feels different. Not euphoria, it's serenity. It's as if your whole body breathes in unison with the universe. The worries are still there, but they no longer carry the same weight. The pain is still there, but it has lost its grip. The soul begins to guide your steps, and fear silently transforms into respect for your own. This is the moment when the inner warrior, the same warrior who endured nights of despair, now walks calmly. He doesn't need to prove anything, nor run away. He understands that life is not against him, but in favor of his growth. Everything that broke him was teaching him not to fragment again. And it is at this point that the narrative prepares to change tone, because the journey does not end with peace. It continues with understanding. When the new self begins to emerge, it brings with it a power that previously lay dormant, the ability to create reality from consciousness. It is the beginning of something greater, the threshold of true awakening. But before reaching it, it is necessary to understand that all light, or shining, passes through darkness. And it is precisely this darkness that prepares the way for the final revelation. There comes a moment when silence ceases to be absence, presence. After so many falls, doubts, and reconstructions, you realize that awakening was never about understanding the universe. Jung said that the purpose of life is individuation, becoming whole, uniting what is light and what is shadow, what is reason and what is emotion, what is human and what is divine within oneself. And when this understanding begins to take hold, something changes. The desperate search for answers gives way to the serenity of someone who finally realizes there is nothing out there to be found that isn't already in some way dormant within it. Mature consciousness doesn't show off. It doesn't need to announce its awakening, because true awakening is silent, almost invisible. It appears in the way you breathe in the face of chaos, in how you treat those who disagree with you, in the calm you offer when the world screams. It is the self-mastery that arises from the profound understanding that control lies not in predicting what happens, but in choosing how to react. And this choice, made repeatedly, is what shapes destiny. You realize that life isn't a battlefield between good and evil, right and wrong, success and failure. It's a space for experimentation, where every experience, even the painful ones, serves a purpose of expansion. When suffering appears, you no longer ask, why me? What is this for? And this simple change of question transforms everything. What once broke you now teaches you. What once hurt you now guides you. What once frightened you now reveals you. This is where discipline and presence become allies. You understand that it's not enough to be aware. You need to sustain it in your life. It's easy to feel enlightened during a deep reading or an inspiring meditation. It's difficult to maintain that clarity while waiting in line at the bank, in traffic, or arguing with someone you love. The true spiritual test doesn't happen in moments of peace, but in moments of friction. That's where you discover if the light you carry is real or merely theoretical. To put this awakening into practice, it is necessary to develop 3 simple but powerful attitudes. The first isn't a teaspoon reacting. Breathe and observe. Observe your emotions as one watches the waves of the sea come, break, and dissipate. You are not the waves, you are the ocean. The second is to accepting is not agreeing. It's recognizing what is, without resistance. What you accept transforms. What you reject persists. And the third is act consciously. Choose your next step deliberately, even if it's a small one. Because awakening isn't about grand gestures, but about small, consistent decisions. Jung used to say that emotion is the primary language of the unconscious. Ignoring it is trying to converse with the soul in language it doesn't understand. Therefore, whenever you feel anger, fear, or sadness, listen instead of reacting. Anger may be asking, fear may be asking for presence. Sadness may be asking for a pause. When you learn to translate what you feel, emotional chaos transforms into emotional wisdom. And emotional wisdom is freedom. There's a recurring scene in the life of someone who awakens, the reunion with their own reflection. At some point, you look in the mirror and realize that your gaze is no longer the same. There's no arrogance, no guilt, just awareness. You recognize the scars, but you don't carry them as a burden. You carry them as proof. Each healed wound is a conquered territory of the soul. It's a reminder that you went through hell and returned bringing light. Awakening also changes your relationship with time. Before, you lived waiting for the future. When I go, when I succeed. Now, you understand that everything happens here and now. The present ceases to be a bridge and becomes your destination. It is in the present that you build, love, forgive, and transform. The past ceases to be a prison and becomes a library. The future ceases to be anxiety and becomes a consequence. The mind aligns with the heart, and the movement of life flows naturally. But it's important to remember, awakening isn't linear. There are relapses. There are days when the shadow returns to dominate, when fear seems greater than faith. This doesn't mean you've regressed. It means your consciousness is being tested to become stronger. Each fall serves to remind you that the path is alive. Learning never ends. The awakened self isn't the one that never makes mistakes, but the one that learns faster from each mistake. From that point on, life ceases to be a race and becomes a dance. You understand that you don't need to conquer time, only accompany it. That you don't need to dominate the world, only cooperate with it. That you don't need to eliminate the shadow, only integrate it. Harmony is born when you stop fighting against yourself. Awakening is not about ascending to heaven, it's about descending to earth with it. It's about looking at the other, seeing the same mystery that lives. It's understanding all existence is an attempt by the universe to recognize itself in infinite forms. And that's where true peace arises. Not an empty peace, but the peace of someone who finally understands that life doesn't need to be perfect to be sacred. You realize that everything you were looking for, love, meaning fulfillment, was always here, waiting for the right moment to be noticed. That's the reward of awakening. Not a life without problems, but a mind that doesn't get lost in them. From now on, Every step you take is different. You speak more lightly, listen more attentively, feel more deeply. You begin to see beauty even in what once seemed banal. And when someone asks you, what has changed? You answer with a simple smile. Stop running. Awakening is not an event. It's a choice that is renewed every morning with every gesture, every breath. So if these words resonated with you, they touched something silent that is long awaited to be heard, use this moment as a turning point. Don't wait for the perfect sign, nor the ideal tomorrow. Start today. Observe, accept, act consciously. Make presence your path, because true awakening doesn't happen once, it happens now, this very instant. Choose to be awake. If this video sparked something in you, leave a comment. Even if it's anonymous, even if it's just one letter. Sometimes, the simple act of writing is the first step in transformation. Like this video, if it brought you clarity, and share it so it reaches those who are also ready to take in. And if you want to continue this journey of self-discovery, guided by the ideas of Carl Jung and the psychology of consciousness, subscribe to the channel. That way, we will walk together, one step at a time, towards a more conscious, truer, and complete life.